Are you tired of your familiar just doing the help action during combat? Would you like to see a familiar pull its weight in combat? Well, you're in luck, because behind today's secret door, the rise of the Pseudodragon. So behind today's secret door, the rise of the Pseudodragon. This is Secret Door, a channel devoted to in-depth discussion about Dungeons and Dragons, and my name is Matt Morich. Alright, I have started a Patreon. If you're interested in supporting the channel, your help would be greatly appreciated and much needed. And many thanks to Marcelo, Doug, and Jamie for your support. The link will be in the pinned comment and in the description. So the whole impetus of this video stems from a comment that came on my Pact of the Chain Familiars ranked video. And this viewer's comment, as surprising as it was to me because I completely missed this, they were right, and it has to do with the Pseudodragon, and it's going to probably create a bit of controversy with some of you, I would imagine. I know that it did for me. I actually, in the comments, I'm going back and forth with this viewer and saying, I don't think that's true. And then I gradually realized, no, it's true. Wow. And so the point of it is this. In that video, I praise and praise and praise the sting, the Pseudodragon sting, because now it doesn't require an attack roll. It's just a straight-up saving throw, and therefore that's not only good, but if you were to get investment of the Chainmaster, it will now scale. And all of that is true. Of course I was right about that. That's not a brilliant observation on my part. I missed the brilliant observation, and this was coming from the viewer themselves, and that is this. It doesn't have an attack roll. Therefore, it isn't an attack. Therefore, the familiar can take any other action other than attack. The sting is its own action. So, the Pseudodragon will be able, rule as written, to be able to use the sting regardless of whether you have investment in the Chainmaster or regardless of whether you are sacrificing an attack in order to give the familiar an attack. In fact, if you did that, if you sacrifice your attack to make the familiar attack, it could not use the sting action because the sting action is not an attack. So this means this is really kind of a crazy scenario we're in now. I mean, it seems like it should be an attack. It requires 5 feet of distance. It's right, it's obviously in the action thing for the stat block. But the way creatures work, it's just a very different thing. That doesn't mean it's an attack. I associate it that way myself, and I'm wrong when I do. The actions are just different. They're completely different than player character actions. The point is because there is no attack roll, it is not, by D&D terminology, an attack. So the Pseudodragon, which I love the Pseudodragon. So part of me is at war with all of this because I love the Pseudodragon. I'm glad that it became more viable, as I was talking about in that other video. And now I'm here to tell you that rule as written, it's become even more viable than ever before. I do not think that it is now like the number one familiar, but it was the number one familiar for combat, and now it's clearly the number one familiar for combat. It's not even close. The gap between it and the Sphinx just went huge and wide. So the interesting part of this is you now have a familiar that you can have that doesn't require investment of the Chainmaster for you to be able to We can't say attack. What will we say? To use an offensive action? I mean, that's what it's doing. So the sting is, without investment of the Chainmaster, it has a DC 12. It has to be within 5 feet. It has to be a target that it can see. It's a Constitution saving throw. If they fail, they take on average 7 points of damage and they are poisoned. And if they fail the saving throw by 5 or more, they fall asleep. So now in the old edition, in the old version where there was a tied to the attack roll, I always just eschewed the idea of this because you had maybe a 50-50 chance of hitting with the Pseudodragon, and then you had another 50-50 of those to actually fail the saving throw, and then the very small chance of the sleep going off made that chain, by the time you were down to it, as a 25% chance of even getting the poison condition, and then an even smaller chance for there to be the sleep. But now that percentage has changed rather substantially because there is no attack roll. So it's doubled, effectively, the chances with the sting. Even with the standard, without using investment of the Chainmaster, having a DC 12 means that if you have a creature with a +3 to their con saves, then you're talking about a 40% chance of them failing that saving throw. And a 20% chance, again with a +3 to the con saving throw, you'd have a 20% chance of putting that creature to sleep. Now, when you look at Constitution saving throws, they're kind of all over the place. But one thing that is true is that you can generally tell, just by looking at the creature, if it's going to have a significant Constitution saving throw or not. So if you're looking at a dragon, if you're looking at giants, if you're looking at anything like that, you can expect a big Constitution saving throw. So in creatures like that, dreaming for the sleep punch that's a bit much. It could still strangely happen, especially if you went with investment of the Chainmaster, or if you did a build specifically to help facilitate the Pseudodragon. But in the straight up math of it, it's just not a very high chance, of course, with a creature with a uber Constitution save. My point in saying all this is that the Constitution saves are generally considered to be the worst save to be inflicting on a creature or the enemy because they're always the highest, and they are, but they're also just not as high as you might think most of the time. So I don't think that it's the Constitution save that's your real problem with the Pseudodragon. It's that it's the poison condition, because if they aren't poisoned, then none of this works. If they're immune to the poison condition, that's going to shut the Pseudodragon down. Now, as immunities go, it's the most common one. Undead, demons, devils, all those they're off the books. Now, that's the first one, the undead. That's a big problem. So depending on your campaign, I mean, if you're playing in Ravenloft or something like that, the Pseudodragon's not going to be all that effective for you. But even outside of undead-heavy environments, the undead just show up a lot in Dungeons & Dragons. And so that is something, before you get all excited about how powerful this is, and it is potentially really, really powerful, it does have those limitations built in. Now, before I get too involved in this, I just want to put it on the table that I'm very conflicted about this whole concept, because I know from experience that there's going to be a lot of DMs that are just going to say, no, that's an attack. I don't care what the rules written is. And that's their prerogative. I have to deal with what is rules written, because part of the premise of the things that I cover in the channel are things that are Adventurers League legal. So because there are so many vagaries of how a DM is going to interpret this or that or the other thing, there's no way I could possibly try to conform to that. So it by the definition of the rule, it is not an attack. It is whatever else you want to call it. And because I know that this is going to cause strife at certain tables and arguments, I'm a little conflicted about even reporting this because I know it's going to create a bit of an uproar here and there. Some of you may be watching this video and already know this, and that's fine. Like I said, it was brought to my attention through a viewer. I didn't pick up on this one myself. So the real point of it is, sure, it's more powerful. Obviously, it's more powerful. Is it broken? I'm going to say no. I've been going through the numbers in my head the last couple of days, and it's powerful. Definitely very powerful. So let's say you went with just the standard Pseudodragon with the DC 12, and you didn't get investment of the Chainmaster, and you're sending the Pseudodragon running around and zapping people every turn. Now, I always assume that you are going to face about 3 encounters a day, about 4 rounds each. So that's 12 rounds of combat in a day. So if the pseudo was out there and it stings 12 times and everybody had, let's say, a +3 con, that's a fairly safe number, I would say. I mean, it's certainly not always going to be accurate, but just as a number to pick, a +3 con, then your total failures in 12 rounds is going to be a little bit better than 4. So 4, sometimes 5. And of those failures, half of those will fail significantly enough that they will go to sleep. So 2, sometimes 3. Now, what that means is that 2 out of the 3 encounters in a day, I mean, it doesn't have to just go out that evenly, but on average, let's just say, you're putting somebody to sleep. That's pretty significant, but you also have to bear in mind that you're not always going to have eligible targets because there's going to be there could be undead, there could be demons, there could be devils, constructs, whatever's immune to the poison condition, and there's plenty of stuff out there, then the pseudo is just not going to work. But if it did have 12 viable targets, that's what you're looking at. So is that broken? Well, it's really powerful. Those numbers go up significantly if you go with investment at the Chainmaster. You can only get investment in the Chainmaster as early as 5th level, which would mean in a standard progression that you would be looking at a DC of 15. So using that same example with a +3 con modifier and with a 15 DC, you're looking at a 55% chance of failure now and a 35% chance overall of causing sleep. That means that you're looking at 6 poisoned targets out of 12 rounds, assuming that they're all viable, and half of those falling asleep. So 3. A little bit better than 3, so it'll be 3, sometimes 4. That means 1 every combat and sometimes 2 in a combat. Now we're talking. But this was always viable with investment of the Chainmaster anyway. If you went with investment of the Chainmaster, the real big benefit here for you is that you don't need to use the bonus action to get it to go. The significance for a Warlock not having to worry about using a bonus action to get the pseudo to sting would be something like, first of all, if you're using Hex, you've got to use a bonus action in the first round of combat to establish it, and then probably you have to move it at one point during the combat as well. If you're Pact of the Blade, you might have a feat that is allowing you a bonus action attack. In fact, if your DM goes along with this, you might want to take investment of the Chainmaster just for the reaction alone, because the Pseudodragon will now become a target. It can move 60 feet in flight, which means it will hit anything on the map that you want. It will get to target, and it will sting it. This is going to drive your Game Master crazy. So it's going to become a target, and it is not a very resilient familiar. Taking investment of the Chainmaster just to use your reaction to give it damage resistance could be worth it just for that alone, because the pseudo is now going to become a bigger target. So while we're here, let's talk about the magic action controversy, whatever, in terms of Pact of the Chain. So there is a minor controversy that's going on about the wording of, in Pact of the Chain, it says that you can use a magic action to cast Find Familiar. Find Familiar normally has an hour-long casting time, and if you were to cast it as a ritual, that's another 10 minutes. So if you look at the magic action, and this was also brought up to me by yet a different viewer, if you look at the definition of the magic action, in the last portion of it, it will tell you that if you are involved in a spell that has a longer casting time, every round you are taking the magic action. Okay, so that could mean that you're simply just casting it as an hour and 10-minute thing. Or it could be that because of the wording in the Pact of the Chain Invocation, it says a magic item as in, or magic action as in singular. And the you can, to me, implies that you can cast means that you can do something that others cannot do. It is a enabling statement. It is an exceptional kind of statement. And that is the weaker point of all this. Of course, the big thing is the a magic action is the big thing to look at here. I certainly believe myself that it is simply a one action casting for Pact of the Chain, not because that's what I want it to be, but I think that that's what they clearly are intending. But because of the definition of magic action, there is a bit of a conflict there. I bring all this up because if you are using the Pseudodragon this aggressively all the time, not only is it going to get targeted, it is going to die. So the question then becomes, I don't care really how much you protect it, and you can, but if the DM wants to kill it bad enough, they will kill it. Now, there's a whole different point to that, of course, and that is if the Pseudodragon is drawing that much fire from the enemy, that's not such a bad thing either, because the party's not getting hit. But that doesn't change the fact that you're now out of a Pseudodragon. So your ability to recover from that is either going to be an hour and 10 minutes, or it's going to be one action. And of course, you still have to pay for the material components. So this is incredibly powerful and a very, I personally am very excited that the Pseudodragon is this viable now. Having said all of that, the Imp is still better, in my opinion. Overall, not in combat, not even close. The Pseudodragon is the king of the familiars in combat. But the Pseudodragon doesn't have hands. It can fly, but it can't be invisible. It doesn't have hands. The utility of that combination of things in D&D is so enormously powerful that as powerful as the Pseudo is in combat, the Imp is outside of combat, and you could argue far more powerful, far more. The kinds of things you can do that you simply cannot otherwise do, the Imp can do outside of combat. So that then also begs the question of changing the familiar's form. I don't particularly like having a ever-changing familiar. I like having it be an Imp or being a Pseudo. That's just me. So naturally, the best way of approaching this, if you were just into the getting the best of both worlds, is whenever possible, have the Imp out, and then whenever possible, when you feel like you're going into combat or you're in a particularly dangerous area and you don't need the utility function of the Imp, switch it to the Pseudodragon. Simply doing that in a course of an adventuring day could end up costing you quite a bit of gold. So it is something that you have to consider if you're getting the most value out of either one of those things, because there's no way you're going to, be able to call that on the button every single time so that you're in the ideal situation with the Pseudo. So you will get a lot of value out of investment of the Chainmaster, but the beautiful thing is you don't even have to do it. You could always just keep it as is. You're having a lower chance of doing this. And that extra 3 points of DC makes a significant difference, but you're still going to get a lot of value out of it just for what it is. So if you are just grabbing it as a one-level dip, you're going to get a lot of value out of the Pseudodragon or obviously the Imp. So either way, it's very viable and very game-changing for Warlocks specifically and for other people that might also want to grab it. And thank goodness, though, that now there is a viable option because I would say the Imp is certainly number one overall. From a utility standpoint, the Pseudo is not even close, but it's so much better in combat that it's definitely now in the second position, right underneath the imp. And, after that, I would put the Quasit. So 1, 2, 3. So I'm very glad that the Pseudodragon is now back to its rightful place as being viable and fun. It's a great familiar. All right, well, that's all I've got. If you enjoyed the video, please like, please share, please subscribe. And if you're stuck and you don't know where to go, you can always search for a secret door. Until next time, I cast bless on all of you.